What do you mean by 2D array? What is the syntax and example of an 2D array? Let's understand these topics in our today's video. Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Link Frequency and I'm Aishwarya Pattar. This video is part of our course that is C Programming for Absolute Beginners 2022. So without any further delay, let's get started. Two-dimensional array can be defined as array of arrays. Two-dimensional array in C is also known as matrix. Two-dimensional array is organized in the form of matrices where it is represented as a collection of rows and columns. In our previous video, we saw a scenario to find out the average of 100 integer numbers. For this, we used one-dimensional array. Now, let us consider a scenario where we have 50 students and we need to store the marks of 50 students for 5 different subjects. How do you think we can solve this problem? I hope you are thinking about the concept of array for this question. You might probably thinking about creating 5 different 1D arrays for each subject for 50 students to store the values. Well, this can be a lengthy process if the data is huge. To tackle this kind of scenario, we can use multi-dimensional array. Today, in this particular video, we are going to majorly focus on two-dimensional array and understand its concept. There are few points which are majorly noted down in this video. Let's move on to our screen to know more about them. Well, we are onto our screen. I hope my screen is visible. So the first point related to two-dimensional array is about the syntax. How are we going to represent two-dimensional array? So it is very simple. It is like data type followed by the variable name, then row and the column. Let me give an example, that is int array data 3 and 4. Here 3 represents the row value and 4 represents the column value. Moving on to our next point, that is regarding the array initialization. The array initialization can be done during compile time or during runtime. The one represented on the screen is during compile time. And there are multiple ways where you can represent the array initialization. I have listed them in this particular video. So the first one is int array of num 3 and 4 and the values are given inside the curly bracket, that is ranging from 0 to 11. This might seem a bit confusing, like from where to start and which is the column or which is the row. To make it very simple and easy to understand, let me show you the different type of initialization for the array. That is point number B, int array num 3 and 4. And we are grouping it inside a smaller curly brackets. So the first smaller curly bracket represents row 0, the second represents row 1 and the third represents row 2. So this is quite simple and very easy to understand when you look at it. There is one more method where you can do the array initialization, which is represented in point number C. If you notice here, I have skipped the value for row, but the column value is given. So this is a valid format which we can still use for initializing the array. One thing to remember is you can't skip the value for column. So that is the reason I have mentioned it as a note so that you don't forget this point. So if you see here, you can't represent it like this. Int num of 3 and a blank. You will have to give the column value, which is very mandatory for giving 2D array. Moving on to our next point, that is representation of 2D array. How are we going to represent it in the form of matrices? If you have earlier learnt about matrices, you would be knowing that matrices include row x into column. So the same thing is represented here for 2D array also. So here if you can see the screen, you will be able to see rows and columns. I'll use the same example which we are using from initial, that is int array num 3 and 4. So 3 rows and 4 columns. And the representation goes like this: array of 0, 0, array of 0, 1, array of 0, 2, array of 0, 3, and so on. It goes on till array of 2 and 3. To give you a short example, let me consider the values whichever we have used during initialization. Let me try to put the array elements. So in the array of 0, 0, we will have 0 value and value 1 will be stored in array of 0, 1. Value 2 will be stored in array of 0, 2. Value 3 will be stored in array of 0, 3. Value 4 will be stored in array of 1, 0. Value 5 will be stored in array of 1, 1. And so on, it goes on till array of 2, 3, which will have the value 11. One thing, if you have noticed, the storing of the array elements happens row wise. That is, for row 0 will be done first, then row 1 will be done, and lastly row 2 will be done. So this is one of the important point you should remember. The allocation happens row wise. Moving ahead to know about how do we access these array elements. So this comprises of our next point. It is very simple to do it. We have to just mention the array num followed by the row and the column number. For example, if I wanna know the element present here, then I can directly give array of 1 and 2. It will immediately take me to that location. So that is quite simple, similar to 1D array, how we used to access the element, similar thing, but here you have to make sure that you give the proper row and the column number. Moving on to our next point, that is regarding the total number of elements present in 2D array. We can calculate the total number of elements present in 2D array by just one simple formula, that is row into column. Let me show you with the help of an example. Here I have used int array of 2 and 3. 2 represents the row and 3 represents the column. So according to our formula, it is row into column for total number of elements. Same thing I have used, that is 2 into 3, that is equal to 6. In short, you can say that it is a matrices of 2 rows and 3 columns. Additionally, we can also know the memory consumed by this 2D array. There is a short formula you have to remember, that is total number of elements into the size of data type. The total number of elements we calculated just now, that is 6, and size of data type, since we are using int, it is 4. Overall you can do is 6 into 4, that is 24 bytes. So 24 bytes of memory is required for this particular example for 2D array. Hence, these were the few points which were necessary for knowing about 2D array. Let's understand this concept of 2D array in depth with the help of examples. Let's move on to our screen for the code. Now we are back to our screen to know more about the example related to 2D array. I'm going to show you two examples. The first example is related to compile time initialization for 2D array, and the second example will show you about the input taking from the user and then storing the value in the form of 2D array. Let's move on to our screen. I hope my screen is visible. The first example is regarding the compile time initialization for 2D array. So here, as usual, you can see the code. I have taken int I equal to 0 and j equal to 0. The reason to take these two variables is because we have to traverse row and column. So just for our convenience, what I have made is int I equal to 0, we'll use it for row, and int j equal to 0, we will use it for column. As per the syntax of two-dimensional array, here you can see I have written int array of num equal to 4 and 3. 4 represents the row value and 3 represents the column value, and inside that I have given the elements inside the curly brackets. So the first curly bracket indicates row 0, second curly bracket indicates row 1, third indicates row 2, and the last one indicates row 3. Now let us try to understand how we can traverse through this matrices. Here I am using a nested for loop. So the first for loop represents for row and the next for loop represents for the column. Inside this for loop, you can see there is a printf statement which indicates the row, column and the value of the array element. And finally we are end of the j for loop and end of I for loop. Here you can see I have written a display code for array elements. This is because we will try to see how the matrices looks for the input whichever we have given. Again, here also I am using two for loops, that is the first for loop is for row and the second for loop is for column. And here inside that you can see I have written a printf statement for array of I and j. And if at all our j value encounters a 2, then it shifts to the next line. And finally we are out of both the for loops. To make it even more clear, let me run this code. Well, the results are here. Array of 0, 0 has value 1. That is the first element. Then array of 0, 1 has 2. Array of 0, 2 has 3. Array of 1, 0 has 4. And so on, it goes on till array of 3 and 2, which has value 6. Which is similar as represented in this form of initialization. Now let's go to the last part, that is how does this look in a form of matrices. We had written a display code if you remember, right? So it represents like this. As per our array, we have 4 rows and 3 columns. That is 4 rows, first row, second row, third row and fourth row. And individually we have 3 columns. This is how it is represented in the form of matrices. Now let's move ahead to understand the second type of example wherein we will take the input from the user and store the value of the array. Here again I have used int I equal to 0 and j equal to 0. As per a normal standard, we will make sure that I we will use it for row and j we will use it for column. To take input from the user, I'm going to use two for loops, that is in the nested form. The first for loop will traverse the row and the second for loop will traverse the column. Inside the condition, you can see there is a printf and a scanf statement. The printf and scanf statement will help us to get the input from the user. And ultimately, we are out or we come out of both the for loops. And finally, we will also use a display code again so that we can visualize how our array elements look in the form of matrices. So the same code which we saw just few minutes back is rewritten here with for loop for I equal to 0, I less than 4, I plus plus, and then for loop for column, that is j equal to 0, j less than 3 and j plus plus. And inside the for loop we have a printf statement which basically indicates the array num of I and j, and if at all it encounters a value 2, that is j equal to 2, then it shifts to a new line. Then finally we come out of both the for loops. Now let me try to show you the result of this particular code. That will be more easier way for you to understand. So here you can see that enter the array element for 0 0, that is for 0th row and 0th column. What is the array element? Let me give a value. Then the next indication is for 0th row and first column. Let me give value 2. And similarly for 0th row and the second column, what should be the input? Let me give 3. Similarly, I'll go on inputting the values. So I have given all the input required for our array. And finally, you can see how the array matrix looks like. Here you can see whatever input I have given, you can represent it in the form of a row and a column. So basically, we had shown that the array is in the format of array num equal to 4 and 3, where 4 is the row and 3 is the column. Similarly, you can see it here also. 4 rows are there, that is row 0, row 1, row 2 and row 3, and 3 columns are there. So this is how the values are stored. And one point to remember here is the storing of the values happens row wise, that is row 0 will be filled first, then followed by row 1, then followed by row 2 and then followed by row 3. So this is how the storing happens basically. Alright, in this video we saw about two-dimensional arrays and understood it with help of examples and different type of points which were supposed to be known. The same concept can be applied for n-dimensional, like any multiple dimensional, you can apply the same concept and use the matrices form. For any queries related to two-dimensional array, you can surely comment down in the comment section. Your queries will definitely be answered as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching our video. I hope you could enjoy the video content. Consider subscribing to our channel Link Frequency, and also don't forget to share our video across all your connections. Until we meet on our next video, happy learning. Tune yourself to make a difference.